from their website, Life Training Institute. It says, Megan, a former University of Georgia gymnast, was a part of the 2002 SEC championship team. She worked as an award-winning journalist until 2008, joined the Life Training Institute in 2009, was awarded a Master of Arts degree in Christian Apologetics from Biola University in 2011. Megan and her husband, Tripp, who serves as a pastor and a gymnastics coach, have been married since 2003, and they have 2 children, Neely and Rogan. Just to have one more comment, since this is a pro-life message, and in a crowd obviously this size with the age of our students, this may have affected some of us in different ways. And so if after this presentation and then after Trip Lee, if some of you want to talk to somebody about things that you've seen or things that you've experienced in your own life, the Prestonwood Pregnancy Center has sent over some of their counselors who will be in the back if you want to talk to somebody and just be able to digest and share some of the things that you've seen, heard, or experienced in your own life. And I would suggest that you take them up on that. That would be a fantastic opportunity. So in the midst of all this, I know that Megan's presentation is going to be fantastic, so please welcome Megan Almon.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, I look nothing like that guy in your program. He's my boss. So let's do this. All right, so what I want to start talking to you about this morning is actually one of my very favorite things. I love films. I love movies. And my favorite all-time movie, and it's been my favorite movie for quite a while now, is, actually I'm taking a risk by putting this out there, but it's from 2000. It's a Ridley Scott film called Gladiator. Anybody know that film? Oh, good. All right, great. We can go. So for those of you who've never seen it, Gladiator is a film about a guy named Maximus. He is a very well-loved general in the Roman army. And through kind of a twisted series of events, he is betrayed and he becomes a slave to Rome. He is forced to fight in the arena. So there's this one scene in the film that is absolutely brilliant, and that's the one I want you to focus on. I kind of want to take you there for just a second. If you could imagine this with me, if you haven't seen it, if you have, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's the scene right before Maximus and the guys that he's going to be fighting with walk out into the Roman Colosseum for the very first time. You guys with me? Those of you who've seen it, nod your heads, yeah? Yeah, so they're under the Colosseum. Things are really dismal and dark, and they don't know what's coming because they haven't been in the Colosseum yet. And so what we see, and it's brilliantly done by Scott, what we see is that these guys are underneath the Colosseum, they're waiting to go out, and there's kind of a number of moods in the air, and they all get displayed. Some of them are terrified, and they're visibly shaking. Some of them, like Maximus, are trained warriors, and so they're kind of resigned to the idea of what's about to take place, right? Some of them have given up hope altogether. They don't know what's going to happen. And as the doors open, we are with the main character, and we walk out into the Colosseum, and what you immediately experience is overwhelming. It's the roar of the crowds as their feet touch that sand. And even with them, as they're watching them, they walk out and they're kind of stumbling around looking because they don't know what to think. They're trying to take all of this in. They are completely overwhelmed by what's around them. But here's what I want you to understand about Maximus, because he knows something that not all of us actually realized when we were watching the film. He has 2 things that he's about to face. Number 1, the thing we all get, is a battle. He's about to face a battle. He doesn't know what's coming through those gates, but he does know that whatever comes through those gates, he has to survive that to fight and live another day. Now, what's not so obvious to us is the second thing. It's bigger than that battle. It's a war. He knows that in order to survive at all, he has to win those crowds. He has to win those crowds. See, Maximus lived in a society where some human beings didn't matter as much as other human beings. In fact, they were killed in the arena for entertainment. Men and women. And by the way, I'm going to address you as men and women today because you are young men and women. You're not boys and girls. And when it comes to the issues that we're talking about at this conference, I need you to step up and be men and women of integrity and great courage. You live in a society where some human beings don't matter as much as others. This is nothing new. If you've studied ancient Rome, you've seen it. If you fast forward to a speaker a little bit ago who was talking about World War II, you understand that this took place then as well. Slavery, same thing. And by the way, it's still ongoing because sex trafficking, just another form of saying human beings are commodities that can be used for something. And if I'm right about the issue of abortion, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today, then the effect of that idea that some of us don't matter as much as others is causing a death toll between 2,000 and 3,000 every single business day. Look around you, men and women, that is this room. What's going on out there on your campuses and as you leave your school and you go onto a university campus are battles and wars, and they're over ideas. Now, this is nothing new. Paul told us to expect this. In fact, he said, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 5, that our weapons are not weapons of flesh and blood, but are divinely powerful for the destruction of strongholds, that we are to tear down every lofty opinion, read idea, argument raised up against the knowledge of God. 1 Peter 3:15 tells us how we do it, with gentleness and respect. But that's what we're to do. And most of the ideas that are swirling around out there, see, when you are on your campus, every conversation you face is like that battle from Maximus. You don't know what's coming through those gates, but you've got to navigate that conversation. And the larger war that you face is the moral climate and the culture around you. You've got to win that. It's a big deal, and there's too much at stake to get these ideas wrong. Another movie, Inception. An idea really can be the most dangerous thing, can it? See, ideas have real-world consequences. And these ideas are devastating. So I want to talk to you about ideas. There are two questions that our culture is struggling to answer right now. The first one is this one, if you're taking notes. Is truth really true? Now that sounds like a word game. You're like, why is the pro-life person talking about this? But this is huge. What I want to know is truth, and particularly moral truth, because we're here to discuss a moral issue. Is that something real that I can know, or is that something I decide for myself? Second question our culture is struggling to answer right now pertains to you directly. Why are human beings valuable? What is it that gives you value? Have you ever thought about that for just a second? What is it that gives you rights that other people are obligated to respect? What is that thing? And if someone wanted to strip you of your most fundamental rights, what is the thing you would appeal to say you can't do that? See, we have to get the answers to the questions right, because there's too much at stake not to. Underneath the issue of abortion is the same question that's underneath any other injustice that we face, and it's this one: who counts? Who counts as one of us, and who gets to decide that? So right from the get-go, I want you to understand that the way you answer this issue will impact the way you answer all those others. Christians, how do you share a gospel message with a world that has no idea what it means to be human and valuable? This is huge. So what we're going to talk about today, number one, I'm going to talk about that truth question for just a second, because we've got to lay some framework that we can build on. And then we're going to make a case for the pro-life view, an apologetics case that may surprise some of you. Because after all, if the pro-life view is true, it will stand in the marketplace of ideas, even on hostile ground. We're going to learn how to do that together. So let's talk about truth. And to do that, I'm going to shift gears here. We've been talking about battle, and I wanted to be serious and heavy with that opening, because this is serious and heavy. But to talk about truth, we're going to lighten it just a little bit. We'll talk about something else that's very important to me, and that is ice cream. Are we good with that? Yeah, who doesn't want to talk about ice cream? It's never too early in the day for ice cream. So here's the deal, guys. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. And in Atlanta, there is a little-known place called Jake's Ice Cream and Sorbets. It's a hole in the wall, basically. Like, not many people know it's there. It's in the Irwin Street Market near the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. If you ever visit Atlanta, go there. You're welcome. So go to Jake's, and what I know about Jake's is this: Jake's salted caramel ice cream. We'll just take a moment for silent reflection on that. Yeah, pretty much like a religious experience. Jake's salted caramel ice cream in a waffle cone is the best dessert on the face of the planet. Can I have a show of hands if you think that statement is true? Awesome. We can all have like a group after. We can be like a friends group, right? Yeah, cool. All right, so how many of you just by chance are offended that I think that statement is true? Anybody? Yeah, I'm serious about my ice cream too. Ice cream in college football, right? Yeah, I get it. Okay. Let's try this one. What if I were to say to you, Jake's salted caramel ice cream, in a waffle cone is the cure for juvenile diabetes? Raise your hand if you think that's true. Okay, good job. No, don't raise your hand. Notice I did not raise my hand either, lest you question why I'm even here. All right, there was something really different about that second claim. Let me talk about this for just a second before we can move forward. The first claim told you a little something about me. In fact, it told you more about me than it did about the ice cream. It was a subjective claim, and I'm the subject. Subjective truths are truths that you, the subject, create. Because you create them, they are matters of personal preference, like choosing one flavor of ice cream over another one. And because you create them, by their very nature, all subjective truths are equally true. Because my flavor of ice cream has no more authority than your flavor of ice cream, really, which is why none of you were offended, except a couple. I get it, right? The second claim didn't say a whole lot about me, except maybe for a second you were like, why did they invite her again, right? It said something about the objects in question. In this case, we have the ice cream and its relationship to the disease. This was an objective claim. Now, objective truths are truths that exist independently of the subject. That means they are true whether I prefer them or not. They're true whether I'm even aware of them or not. They are truths that you discover rather than create. And so by their very nature, objective claims can be right or wrong, true or false. Are you with me so far? Yeah. We live in a culture that thinks that religious and moral claims, like the one I'm going to make in just a minute, in particular, are subjective in nature. That means, men and women, when you make a religious or a moral claim in our society, it is viewed as something you have created, a matter of personal preference, like choosing one flavor of ice cream over another. And no one's moral claim has any more authority than anyone else's. That's what that looks like. But, when you make a religious or a moral claim, no matter what your claim is, guys, you're saying something about the nature of reality. Your statement is about what the world is really like. That's not a preference claim. That's an objective type of claim, meaning it can be by its very nature right or wrong, true or false. So let me make a quick observation about this. My claim that I'm going to defend today is this one. Abortion is wrong because it intentionally kills an innocent human being. Now, when I make that claim, I actually think that I'm right about that, which means I think that people who disagree with me are wrong. It's an objective type of claim, and even saying that to you makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I live in the same culture that you do, and most often when you use words like that, those are fighting words. People think that was arrogant, and we live in a culture that I think is trying very hard not to be arrogant. But listen, because my claim is objective, that means that when I make it, I am very aware that by its very nature, I'm submitting to you all that I could be wrong about it. That's a humble way to go about it. I could be. I don't think that I am. I have excellent reasons that we're going to talk about as to why I've arrived at the conclusion that I've arrived at. But if I were to draw from the culture and tell you this is my subjective preference, this is my truth, guys, what I would be saying to you is that I think I'm right about it and I can't be wrong. because all subjective truths are equally valid. That's very different. That's the first hurdle that you have to overcome in conversation with people, is to not let them turn the tables on you and make this into a preference type of thing or an ice cream type of thing. It's not. But our culture gets this confused all the time when it comes to abortion in particular. How many of you have ever heard the slogan, "Don't like abortion, don't have one"? Anybody? Kind of familiar with that? Yeah, it's been popular. It's on bumper stickers. There is a word in that statement that I have a real problem with. Can you guess the word? Yeah, I hear some of you, the word "like," because it takes an objective claim and tries to twist it into a preference type of claim, and it's not that type of claim. Do you know how I know this? What if that sticker said, "Don't like slavery, don't own a slave"? That's a moral issue that we understand a little better. If I said that to someone, they would look at me and think I'm nuts and say, "Obviously, you don't grasp the severity of that situation." And they'd be right. We're not there on abortion yet. Very simple study of the past 2 presidential elections. If you were to go back and watch the vice presidential debates, they almost mirror one another in that, in both cases, the moderator framed the discussion on abortion as a subjective question. She wanted the candidates' personal responses. That's the national stage, men and women. Our country is dying to talk about this issue as if it is an ice cream issue, and it's not. So how do we shed light in a culture like that? Well, 3 ways. Number 1, I want to talk to you about how we simplify this issue. Now, don't hear me saying, "Oh, abortion is a simple issue," because on the face of it, that doesn't sound right. I'm very well aware that there are many complex things that bump into this issue. In other words, as my colleague Jay Watts would say, there's a lot wrong with abortion. But men and women, there's only one reason abortion is wrong. So morally speaking, it is a simple issue. The entire debate hinges on one question, and that's the question that we have to bring the conversation back to. So we're going to talk about how to do that. That's how we simplify the issue. Then I'm going to answer that question. And the last thing we're going to do in our time together is talk about why you matter. That's my favorite part. So simplifying the issue. I want you to fast forward in your minds about 10 or 15 years down the road. Imagine that you are married, living in your dream home. I live in a cabin in the woods, not the scary kind, the cool kind. So if you don't have a dream home, you can borrow that for a second, okay? And you're standing at your kitchen window. You are washing dishes. Now, that's not fun, but just go with it, okay? You are up to your elbows in dish suds, right? Looking out the window. And your 4-year-old son walks into the room behind your back. Everybody there? Now, imagine he says to you, you cannot see him. He says, "Mommy or Daddy, can I kill this?" Yeah. Just as an aside, those of you who have been 4-year-old boys know that this takes place sometimes. All right, I have a 4-year-old son. We live in the woods. He brings into my home species that I did not even know existed. And he wants to keep them as pets. So future parents, that's for free. All right, it's going to happen to you. It's terrifying. So what do you answer, Mom or Dad? What's your answer going to be? Woo, I hear yes, emphatically. Okay, I might have a question for him. Son, what is it? Right? Don't you want to know what he's holding? Because here's the deal. If my son is holding a cockroach, I'm going to help him kill it. Quickly. I don't do cockroaches in my kitchen. Judge me if you want to. All right? If my son is holding the next door neighbor's dog, no. No, please put the dog back. The dog barks all night. But we're going to put the dog back. If my son is holding his sister, yeah, guys, I am married to a pastor. I don't know where we go at that point, right? We have a real problem on our hands. But the point is, the answer to what is it matters. We're here today to discuss the question, can we kill the unborn? And you know what? I say, sure. If the unborn are not human beings. If it is true that having an abortion is no different than clipping a fingernail or pulling a tooth, then I don't have an issue with it. But men and women, if the unborn are human, that is a different matter altogether. See, we have to answer that question, what is the unborn, before we can talk about whether or not we can kill the unborn. That's the question at the center of the debate. Now, what happens is people tend to skip that question. They'll go ahead and give you reasons as to why abortion should be allowed, as to why it should be okay. And I can name a few of those reasons. Number one, women should have the right to make their own personal, private decisions. Now, let me get something clear with you guys. I am pro-choice in any number of things, right? I chose where I went to college, go dogs. I chose to marry the most handsome man alive. That's not subjective, that's completely objective. If you met him, you would agree with me. And then I chose this cabin in the woods. I chose how to decorate it. I chose what car I drive. I chose my profession. It's this choice that I differ on because of the nature of it. So, women have the right to make their own personal, private choices when it comes to abortion. That's one of the claims that you'll hear. This woman cannot afford another mouth to feed. She can't afford to feed the children she already has. Why would you be so judgmental as to make her have this baby? Now, let me get something clear with you about that. I don't take poverty lightly. It's a serious issue. None of what we're going to talk about today is easy. None of it. But we have to make distinctions where they must be made because we have to be careful thinkers in a world that's as broken as ours is. Abortion prevents unwanted children from coming into the world. Abortion prevents disabled children from coming into the world who might have a poor quality of life. You shouldn't push your morality on other people. We could keep going. All of these claims make the same mistake because they have skipped that question. In fact, they do what's in debate called begging the question because they assume at the very outset the very thing they're trying to prove. How many of you guys have a brother? Raise your hand. All right. So imagine if I were to come up to you and ask you, hey, so have you stopped beating your brother yet? I heard a very honest young man say no over here. We'll pray for him. But yeah, no matter, I appreciate honesty. No matter how you answer that question, we would need to pray for you, right? But that was a really unfair question. If I came to you and asked that, you'd go, hey, wait a minute, that's not fair. You assumed that I beat my brother. You didn't bring any evidence to the table. You didn't even ask me. I was begging the question, do you beat your brother, by assuming it at the very outset. When people make the claims that I just made, guys, they're assuming from the outset that the unborn is not human. They're begging that question, what is the unborn? I know this because if I were to walk my 4-year-old son out here, his name is Rogan, he's 4, we know he's human, right? 4-year-olds are human. They're crazy, but they're human. So if I were to walk him out here and give you any one of those reasons, nobody in this room would say, yeah, you can kill him because of that. It's not about those things. It's about what is the unborn. In fact, when you're in conversation with someone, you can do something called trot out the toddler. This is a tactic that we teach at LTI, and it goes something like this. Let's take poverty, for example. Imagine someone said to you what I said a moment ago. This woman cannot afford another mouth to feed. She can't afford to feed the children she already has. Who do you think you are to tell her she has to go through with a pregnancy? Now, I'm not going to get mad at the person who says that, and they might not be nice about it, but I might hold my hand out to the side like this as a visual aid to give them something to look at, and I might say, you know what, for the sake of conversation, let's just say that I have a 2-year-old standing next to me. And her family is really struggling. They can't afford to eat. The parents can barely feed the children, much less themselves. So the family's reached a consensus. They want to kill their toddler to lessen that financial burden. Do you think they should have that right? Now that person is going to look at you like you're nuts. But they'll answer you. They'll say, no, that's crazy. Keep going. Ask them, why not? They will say something like, the toddler is obviously human. The toddler is a person. They may even say, that's different. But now you're back to your question. You can say, is it different? See, I want to know, is the unborn human like that toddler is human? Let's talk about that. Then we can talk about poverty because it is serious. But we've got to get back to that question. Now, I'm not going to leave you hanging, guys. We're going to answer the question. And to do that, I want to point something out about it very quickly. This question, what is the unborn? This is not a religious question. I don't go to my Bible for the answer to this question. Does anybody think of where I might go? I'm asking, what kind of thing is this? I'm hearing some whispers. Yes, I would go to science. This is a scientific question. Biology is the science of life, and even more specific is the science of embryology. It's just the study of embryos. And if you read an embryological textbook, what you will discover is that embryology has been very clear all along. From the very beginning, at fertilization, okay, biology shows us that within 210 milliseconds of sperm meeting egg, you have a new entity, according to scientific definition. So from fertilization, what you have is a living, distinct, whole human being. That's what the unborn is. It's alive. We know it's alive because it fits the definition of an organism. See, it grows. That means it undergoes cellular reproduction. It turns food into energy. That's called metabolism. And it responds to stimuli. We know that the unborn is distinct. That is to say, it's not part of the woman's body. Not like my arm is a part of my body. No, see, it has its own unique genetic code that is different from mom's and dad's. That's why you often hear people say things like, well, it has its own blood type, its own organs, its own gender. All of these things are true, but they're true because it is distinct. And the unborn is whole. That is to say, and then, you know what, let's do this. Why don't you guys show me your hand? Good, turn your hand around for me, good, yep. Take your other hand and very gently scratch the back of that hand and brush it off. Yeah, I was just messing with you. No, I'm kidding, I had a purpose. What we have all successfully done is to scratch several hundred of our own skin cells off of the backs of our hands. Those skin cells just floated to your lap or to the floor, that's kind of gross, where they will die in just a minute. All of them contain your DNA coding, all of them, but no one in the room is guilty of mass murder. Whew. Good news. Okay, those cells are a part of you. Alive, yes, but they're a part of you. They contribute to the overall function of the organism that is you. An embryo is different in kind from just any old cell. It's different from a sperm and an egg cell, both of which contribute to the overall function of a larger organism. An embryo is a whole entity in and of itself, and its parts contribute to its overall function, even at that single-celled stage. And it goes on to do something incredible. Now, we tend to, in our society, think of unborn children as constructed things. Let me explain that. We live in a very industrial society where we build a lot of stuff. How many of you in here can drive? Everybody, oh yeah, congratulations, that's a big deal. Okay, yeah, I drive too, yep. But here's what you have to understand about my driving. I married a person who loves to race things, right? Motorcycles, cars. He and his brother both. They're rally car drivers, and so they race. And in fact, Christopher, my brother-in-law, is a stunt driver, so he's done some work in several films because Georgia's a big filmmaking spot now. The latest Captain America, the Civil War movie, he did some precision driving in that, so pretty cool stuff. Well, what that means for someone like me is that my family car is a Subaru WRX hatchback, about 240 horsepower after they did whatever they did to it. It's a 5-speed. It is very fast, and it's really cute because it's blue, right? That's not materialistic of me at all. But I love my car. My car, though, was put together on an assembly line somewhere. It was put together piece by piece. Now, let me ask you this. When those first 2 metal plates were welded together at the beginning of my car's process, would any of you say, yep, there's your car? It's a simple question. Yeah, no, not yet. At that point, it could have become anything. And in fact, if you take it apart, it ceases to be a car at all. It's just a pile of parts. It's nothing more than a sum of its parts, a constructed thing. That's how people tend to think about the unborn. That's why you hear language like, well, it's just a clump of cells. There's just a mass of tissue, as if you could add some more parts and the end product would be a baby. Think of how we've gone from a term like procreation, and now everybody says reproduction. Ideas have consequences. But the unborn does something that no constructed thing could ever do. It's not constructed at all. It develops itself from within. It's not constructed at all. It develops itself from within. Men and women, that means that you did not come from an embryo. You once were an embryo, and everything that makes you you was already there. We just couldn't see it yet because you were beginning your development. That's amazing, and that's science. Now, we could talk science all day long, and we can try and make our case with people about this. But what I have found is that in a culture like ours, a very postmodern culture, where truth is viewed as subjective, sometimes words don't get very far with people. Sometimes, men and women, talking isn't enough. You have to show them. When you show someone something, it does something to you. It does something just to your gut. Think of when you studied World War II and the Holocaust. It's one thing to read about it. It's another thing to visit the museum in D.C., where they have waist-high walls so that young children in strollers won't be exposed to those images until they're ready. It does something to you. I have brought with me a video clip. It is a very short video clip. It only lasts about 1 minute, maybe a little less than that. It does not show any kind of abortion procedure being performed. It does show the aftermath. There are images in this clip of aborted fetuses from very early in the pregnancy till later in the pregnancy. The reason being that the federal law allows abortion all the way through. Now, it's very hard to look at. And so let me explain this to you. There is music that plays over the clip. The music is there because if this is something that you feel that you do not want to see, if you do not want to look at this, I invite you for the duration of that minute-long clip, just look down. The music, when it ends, the clip is over. Before I show the clip, let me say one more thing. I don't travel around the nation and talk about this issue because it is my idea of a good time. This is incredibly hard stuff. And to my knowledge, I've never met any of you. I don't know what you've been through. I don't know if you have been brushed with this issue or someone you know who's close to you has. I have no idea. But I do know this. Just as I think that the pro-life view is objectively true, I think that Christianity is objectively true. That's the only reason you should believe in anything. And there are wonderful arguments as for why I think that way. Another conversation for another day. In fact, you've heard some of those today from the other speakers. But if it is true, then what that means is that the gospel of Christianity is true as well. The gospel that says a good and infinite and just God created the world, and he created human beings in his image to love him and enjoy him forever. And those human beings chose not God. And when that happened, the playing field was leveled. Because what that meant was that he could have chosen to destroy every single one of us. And if he had chosen to do that, men and women, he would still be good. And he would still be just. That's an incredibly hard truth. But that's what makes the next part so good. See, he didn't choose to do that. He chose to send a rescuer, the second person of the Trinity, the Son, who came into the world, who humbled himself. Listen, guys, the infinite made himself to a single-celled zygote in Mary's womb. That's a human being in its most fragile state. The greatest truly did become the least. And he lived a life that we couldn't, attained a righteousness that we couldn't on our own, and then he laid down his life voluntarily. Nobody took it from him. And when he got back up from the dead, he made a mockery out of sin and out of death. I heard our last speaker talk about the prodigal son. There's one aspect of that story that I want you to understand, that no matter who you are or what you've been through, listen. When the son is coming over the hill, he was still far away. And what did the father do in the story? Did he wait for him to come to the house and hang his head low? No, guys. The father ran to him. Ran to him. Men did not run in that day and time. Guys, they wore like the equivalent of skirts. He would have hiked it and run. He would have become completely undignified because one of his own was seeking help and healing. There is true hope and healing in the gospel of Christ. Don't miss that. Without further ado, if we could please roll the video. Now, the first time I saw that video, I was sitting in a presentation very much like the one you're sitting in right now, and I was offended by it. In fact, I was one of the people who raised my hand, thinking, is this really necessary that you show us that? And the man who spoke that night, the man I work for now, who was supposed to be here, told a story. And so I'll tell you the same story. It took place in 1955 and involved a young black man by the name of Emmett Till. Emmett Till was 14 years old in 1955. He lived in Chicago with his mother. And one summer, she sent him south to visit his cousins in Money, Mississippi. And before he got on the train, she gave him a gift. It was a ring that had belonged to his dad. In fact, it had his dad's initials inscribed on it. And he put the ring on, and he got on the train, and he went south. And when he met up with his cousins, he started bragging to them about his girlfriends. There were two of them back in Chicago. And he got pictures of his wallet of two white girls. And his cousins didn't believe him. So on a dare, Emmett went into Bryant grocery store in Money, Mississippi, and he bought a piece of bubble gum, and then he either winked at the cashier or said something mildly flirtatious to her. The record's not clear as to which it was, but either way, 2 nights later, that woman's husband and another man went to Emmett's uncle's house, and they drug him out of his bed. And they put him in the car and took him to a field on the outskirts of town where they brutally tortured him. And then they murdered him. And then they tied his body to a cotton gin fan with barbed wire, and they threw it into the river. A couple days later, some boys were fishing downstream, and they saw something in the water. It turned out to be Emmett. Now, he was unrecognizable, but he still had that ring on. And so they put his body in a wooden box, and then they nailed the lid shut, and they sent him home to his mother. And when Mamie Till got that coffin, she demanded that her son's funeral be an open casket funeral. And people thought that in her grief she'd lost her mind. They said, "You can't do that. Do you have any idea what that might cost?" And she stood her ground, and she said, "Yes, I do. I want the whole world to know what they did to my boy." So Emmett did have an open casket funeral. Men and women, thousands of people walked by that casket, and they took pictures of his body, and they published those pictures Jet Magazine was only one publication that ran them. And when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus, somebody asked her later, "Ma'am, what gave you the courage to go through with that?" You know what she said? "I couldn't get that boy's image out of my mind." Emmett was a catalyst for change that desperately needed to happen, a human rights issue that needed to change. All I am saying to you is I think it is time we took the lid off of the coffin for this human rights issue, because I'll tell you this, if we don't, our nation that treats this like an ice cream issue will continue to tolerate a Holocaust it never even has to look at. Now let's bring this to a close by talking about why you matter. Now, this is a philosophical question. Why are human beings valuable? And the reason we talk about it is because some people will grant you your science. They'll say, we know that it's human, but it's not a person. What they're really talking about is that some human beings matter more than others. They're talking about value. Philosophy tells us there are only two ways to answer the question, why are human beings valuable? You might be instrumentally valuable. If you think of an instrument, you play it for a purpose. It performs in a certain way. So an instrumental answer is going to deal with a trait or an attribute or an ability. For Emmett, it was skin color. The other option is that you might be intrinsically valuable, another I word. This one is very simple. It means you're valuable in light of the kind of thing you are, no more, no less. So which could it be? Stephen Schwartz tells us that intrinsic value is the answer. In fact, he says there's no morally relevant difference that would make it okay to kill you at that earlier stage of development, but not now. Not one that really works. In fact, Schwartz tells us there's only 4 differences between embryos and us: size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Guys, if you can remember SLED, S-L-E-D, then you've got this. Let's look at them very quickly. Size. The embryo is tiny, therefore it's insignificant. It's nothing more than a pinpoint, some might say. But since when does size determine your value? We could play a game in this room called, hey, let's all stand up. It'd be a dangerous game. There'd only be one person left standing, the tallest person in the room. See, what happens when you make size the determining factor, and you say that tiny human beings don't matter, is that you create a value spectrum on which smaller human beings are less valuable than larger ones. See, logic demands consistency, and size just doesn't work. Level of development, the unborn are less developed than we are. That is true. Guys, my daughter is 10 years old. Her name is Neely. She does not yet have a fully working reproductive system. She hasn't developed it. She's less developed than everybody in this room. But none of you would say that I could kill my daughter because she's less developed than us. But if you're going to demand it for the unborn, you got to be consistent across the board. We run into all kinds of problems. Environment, that's where you're located. The unborn are located inside of their mother. We're outside. Yep, that's true. But since when does where you are have any bearing on what you are? If it is true that a 7 to 9 inch journey down the birth canal makes a non-valuable entity into a valuable one, be careful if you move to a new address, guys, or to the next seat. And degree of dependency, the unborn are dependent on their mothers for survival. Yes, they are. My mom is diabetic. She loves ice cream, but she has to have her medicine to eat anything. And without that medicine, my mom will not survive long. She is dependent on it because her body doesn't work in the way that it's supposed to. But none of you would say you should kill your mom because of her dependency. But if you're going to grant it for the unborn, you got to grant it down the road as well. And what we find is that when we choose instrumental answers, we run into big problems because they create value spectrums, because traits and abilities come to us in varying degrees. That's why we have this beautiful thing called diversity. But the unifying factor is that we're all intrinsically valuable. Your value lies in your humanity, no more, no less. Now that's a great big truth. What that means for you, men and women, is that none of the instrumental reasons the world will throw your way just today as to why it says you matter, none of them are true. Not ultimately. That means you don't have to be the types of men and women who let the world define you. So don't be. This is what page 1 of the Bible says when it says that you were made in his image bearers. I pray that that gospel truth sinks into you so deeply, and to the degree that you begin to walk in it, you will become dangerous to this world because they will not know what to do with someone like you. They didn't know what to do with Jesus, and he looked just like that. And I pray that that will give you the courage to speak in the place of these unborn children who cannot speak for themselves. God bless you.